Breaking news! Things are moving along behind the scenes for the Eagles, and we have some news to share with you. There are a lot of names on the list, and I hope our GM makes the best choices. We'll also talk about Myles Garrett, who has been generating a lot of controversy among fans. Before we start, make sure you've hit the like button if you've been a Philadelphia Eagles fan for over 22 years. It's great to see fans of all ages. If possible, comment something like, "Go Birds! My heart bleeds green and white." The Philadelphia Eagles are gearing up for one of the most significant off-seasons in recent memory, and it all starts with a potential cap move that could reshape the defense. Cutting Darius Slay and James Bradberry could instantly free up $15 million, pushing the Eagles' cap space to a whopping $60 million. That kind of flexibility could allow GM Howie Roseman to make big moves in free agency, potentially bringing in game-changing talent. Now, let's break it down. Slay, a veteran cornerback, has expressed his desire to stay in Philadelphia for another season. But at this point, with his contract voidable, the Eagles have a choice to make. Do they take a chance on a younger, hungrier player like Khalil Ringo or Isaiah Rodgers? Do they look to the draft for new talent? The same questions apply to Bradberry, whose Achilles injury kept him out all of last season. The Eagles initially signed him to a hefty deal after their Super Bowl 57 loss, but with a history of injuries and positional concerns, his value has dropped significantly. Trading him isn't an option, his market value has evaporated. Cutting Slay and Bradberry seems like the next logical step. Eagles fans know that Howie Roseman is a master of the offseason. This man can turn a few contract restructures into a championship contending roster. With $60 million in cap space, he can lock down key players, extend Jalen Hurts without creating a financial burden, and even make a splashy signing to bolster the defense. The possibilities are endless when you have that kind of cash to play with. One name that's been floating around? DeMarcus Walker. The Bears just released the veteran defensive lineman, and he could be an intriguing depth piece for the Eagles. At 30 years old, he's still producing. He racked up 7 sacks last season, and he's versatile, playing both on the edge and the interior. Oh, and there's a connection. He played under Vic Fangio in Denver back in 2019. Could this be a reunion? The Eagles need more depth on the defensive line, and Walker might be a cheap, short-term option to fill that gap. But the defensive shakeup doesn't stop there. The Eagles' assistant defensive coaches are all staying put for another season, and that's a huge win. Christian Parker, Clint Hurt, and Bobby King will return, providing continuity for a defense that desperately needs stability. Parker, in particular, has been a rising star in coaching circles, and it's only a matter of time before he gets a shot at a defensive coordinator job. Keeping him for at least one more season is a big deal. Now, let's talk about one of the most under-the-radar storylines coming out of the Super Bowl, Nolan Smith. The young pass rusher tore his tricep in the first half, but played through the entire second half with the injury. That's next-level toughness. The Eagles have high expectations for him in 2025, and there's a belief that he could be a double-digit sack player next season. If he takes that leap, it could completely change the dynamic of this defense. So, here's the real question for Eagles fans. Would you cut both Slay and Bradberry to free up that $15 million? Do you trust young guys like Ringo and Rodgers to step up, or would you rather see another veteran brought in? And what about DeMarcus Walker? Does he make sense as a depth addition? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to stay locked in for more Eagles updates. This offseason is going to be wild, and you won't want to miss a second of it. With $60 million in potential cap space, the Eagles are in a position to make some serious noise this offseason. But let's not forget one of the biggest stories swirling around Philadelphia right now, a possible blockbuster trade for Myles Garrett. Yes, you heard that right. The rumors are heating up, and Howie Roseman is reportedly sniffing around to see if a deal can be made to bring one of the best defensive players in the league to Philly. This isn't just some wild speculation. Vegas odds have the Eagles right behind the Washington Commanders as one of the top landing spots for Garrett if the Browns decide to move him. And why wouldn't the Eagles go all in on a player like this? Garrett is a game wrecker, a former defensive player of the year, and exactly the kind of superstar that could push this defense over the top. Imagine pairing him with Haason Reddick, Jalen Carter, and Jordan Davis. That's nightmare fuel for opposing quarterbacks. So, how could the Eagles make this work financially? Well, the salary cap is exploding. The NFL announced that the cap for 2025 will be between $277.5 million and $281.5 million, a massive year-over-year increase. And it's only going to keep going up thanks to changes in how the league measures TV ratings. Smart teams, like the Eagles, are already planning for this, and Howie Roseman is one of the best at structuring contracts to take advantage of future cap jumps. Here's what could happen. If the Eagles let Josh Sweat and Milton Williams walk talk in free agency, they could use that money to absorb Garrett's contract. Sweat is a solid player, but Garrett is a different breed. If the Eagles pull this off, they could be looking at one of the most dominant defensive lines in NFL history. And let's not forget that Garrett is only 28. He's still in his prime. But that's not the only major storyline right now. The Eagles' offense is undergoing some big changes too, and one of the biggest moves was the promotion of Kevin Patullo to offensive coordinator. If you ask A.J. Brown, this was a great hire. Brown has been vocal about his support for Patullo, and that's a big deal. When your star receiver is on board, that's a sign that things are moving in the right direction. Lane Johnson also gave his stamp of approval, which tells us that Patullo wasn't just a safe internal hire, he was the right choice. Unlike last year, when the Eagles made the mistake of promoting Brian Johnson without bringing in fresh ideas, they've now paired Patullo with Kellen Moore, and the expectation is that the offense will evolve. And let's be honest, it has to. The league caught up to the Eagles' old scheme in 2023, and they never adjusted. That can't happen again. One of the most interesting things A.J. Brown said recently is that the entire team is still hungry. Winning the Super Bowl didn't satisfy them the way they thought it might. That's exactly what you want to hear. This team isn't complacent. They want to build a dynasty, and they know that standing still isn't an option. That's why this offseason is so crucial. The Eagles need to reload, make tough decisions on veterans, and potentially make a massive splash with a player like Myles Garrett. They're already one of the youngest teams in the league, with an average age of just 26 heading into 2025. With the right moves, they could be set up to dominate for years to come. So, Eagles fans, it's time to sound off. Should the Birds go all in on Myles Garrett? Is it time to move on from Slay and Bradbury? And what do you think of the Kevin Patullo promotion? Drop your thoughts in the comments. One thing is clear. This is going to be one of the most aggressive off-seasons in Eagles history, with massive cap space potentially opening up, a blockbuster trade in the works, and a revamped coaching staff. The pieces are coming together for Philadelphia to make another deep playoff run in 2025. But let's not forget the draft, because this year's class could be crucial in shaping the future of this team. The Eagles currently hold the 32nd overall pick in the first round, and that pick is a hot commodity. If they trade for Myles Garrett, that pick could be on the move. But if they keep it, what's the best move? A lot of fans are hoping for another defensive lineman, and that makes sense. This franchise has built its identity on dominating the trenches. But there's also a strong argument for adding a young cornerback to develop behind or even replace Slay and Bradbury. Kelee Ringo showed flashes last season, and Isaiah Rodgers has potential, but having another high-end talent in the mix wouldn't hurt. There's also the possibility of trading up. If Howie Roseman sees a defensive game-changer or even a top-tier offensive weapon falling in the draft, don't be surprised if he pulls the trigger on a move. Remember, this is the same GM who jumped ahead of the Giants in 2021 to snag DeVonta Smith and then pulled off a draft day trade for A.J. Brown in 2022. Roseman is always thinking a few steps ahead, and this draft will be no different. So, Eagles fans, there are so many big decisions ahead. What do you want to see happen? Should the Eagles go all in on a Myles Garrett trade, or should they build through the draft? Do you trust Kelee Ringo and Isaiah Rodgers at cornerback, or do you want another veteran added to the mix? And what about the offense? How do you think things will change under Patullo and more? Let me know in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed, because this offseason is going to be a roller coaster. The Eagles are gearing up for something big, and you won't want to miss a second of it. Fly, Eagles, fly!